Welcome to Collapse Astrology, and welcome to part 2 of my 3-part series on Uranus and Gemini. If you haven't seen part 1, you might want to start there because today's video isn't so much about the broad themes of the transit as it is about one specific astro event that will happen during it, the third United States Uranus return. The United States has Uranus and Gemini in its natal chart, the chart from July 4th, 1776, and it comes back around starting in 2027 and has 3 peaks between July 2027 and May of 2028. Before we get into it, let me make a quick introduction for anyone who might be new here. My name is Hummingbird, and I am a mundane astrologer with a background in politics and history, among other things, and I've been making political astrology content since 2018. And I will just say straight up, I am not a love and light astrologer, and this in particular will not be a love and light kind of video. The US Uranus return has a dark track record, and today we're going to face that head on. In my opinion, any astrologer who's making purely optimistic predictions about this transit is naive and disconnected from reality, but I mean, some folks swing that way, so if that's you, just go ahead and click away. I do also want to remind you all about 2 events coming up. My masterclass on Uranus transits and the digital age happening at the end of July, and the Revolution Rising Summit I'm presenting at in early August. So stick around until the end of the video or check in the description box for more information on those. And if you want some more personalized advice on how to handle Uranus and Gemini, head to my horoscope channel, Horoscopes by Hummingbird, where you can find separate videos for each sign to help you understand how this transit might impact your natal chart. Okay, so now let's start our journey into the edgy territory of the United States Uranus return. This is the natal chart of America from July 4th, 1776 at 5:10 p.m., known as the Sibley chart. And this chart has Uranus in the 6th house at 8 degrees of Gemini. Uranus takes about 84 years to go around the sun, so it's come back to its natal position twice before, and now we're closing in on the 3rd time. For those who want to track it closely, the exact dates of this Uranus return are July 26th, 2027, November 5th, 2027, and May 11th, 2028. The previous 2 Uranus returns were exact at very turbulent times in this nation's history. The first one happened in 1860 to 1861, right as the Civil War was starting, and the second one happened on May 30th, 1944, in the midst of World War II, 1 week before D-Day. As we'll get into, this placement really brings forward themes of warfare and military as well as technology. Each return happened not only at a time of war, they also each signified a new era in weapons development and what we now call the military-industrial complex. Anyone who's paying attention knows that we're also at a wild edge around those subjects right now. Weapons manufacturing is pretty much the only industry that America hasn't completely exported. Our military has an enormous budget compared to every other country in the world, even those with much larger populations. And a lot of the environmental degradation around the world is happening to serve our military, from its immense use of fossil fuels to the uranium enrichment process necessary to produce nuclear weapons, to the rare earth mineral harvesting that causes mass swaths of devastation to both land and human populations in areas that we call third world countries. Because this 3rd return is happening at the same time as the United States Pluto return, the first Pluto return, which corresponds to what I might sum up simply as the decline of the American Empire, the outcome will be different than the first 2 times. At least that is my prediction. In the 3rd part of this series, I'm going to get into what I do think might happen, the possibility of high-tech, transnational breakaway civilizations that drop the dollar, declare themselves independent of any nation state, and leave 99% of us in the dust to survive the oncoming climate crises, pandemics, and famines while they try to make real their fantasies of interplanetary colonization. This is not fear-mongering or exaggeration. These are the real, freely spoken philosophies and wet dreams of people like Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, Curtis Yarvin, and many other psychopathic billionaires. Now, will they be successful? I don't necessarily think so, because one spark of hope I've found during my research into the deepest, darkest parts of Western history is that the white man narcissists who think they can completely control world events are always, always wrong. They always underestimate the power of life, of love, and of evolution. They always try to kill it, and they never succeed. But we've got to face the darkness head on, both in the past and in the present, if we want to grab back the steering wheel of reality and help humanity find a different course. So yeah, sorry, I told you this wasn't going to be love and light. But let's look a little more at the astrology now, because it's not only the history and the timelines, but the archetypes that are relevant here. I want to talk some about the mundane astrological interpretation of this Uranus placement, but first I want to give a little disclaimer about the branch of astrology called mundane astrology. I honestly don't know that mundane astrology is a great descriptor for the broader type of political and historical interpretations that I offer, but it's the closest traditional branch that resonates, and especially the interpretation of a nation's birth chart is the most basic form of traditional mundane astrology. Technically, mundane astrology is considered the most ancient branch of Western astrology. It was around before natal astrology became a thing, and historically, it was mostly used to determine when a country should go to war, who it should form alliances with, when a king was likely to die, and other things like that. But even though it's been used pretty much forever, as far as I've found in my studies, it's much less fleshed out, and the traditional techniques of interpretation are way, way less accurate than natal astrology tends to be. There are very few books on mundane astrology, and the ones that are out there are all written by white men with no analysis of empire. The two that are considered the foundational texts of mundane astrology were written before Pluto was discovered, so obviously there's going to be a lot missing there. And the more modern ones, of which there are also only really 2 or 3, at least that I've come across, look at history through an astrological lens, but don't bring that analysis into the present day. So there's just not that much to draw from in terms of other quote-unquote experts when you're trying to interpret something like the US natal chart and its current transits. However, even according to the vague, not always resonant, mundane astrological frameworks, there is a lot that makes sense about the United States Uranus placement, especially if you do have an analysis of empire. So you can see that the United States has a Gemini descendant and Mars in Gemini in the 7th house. The 7th house is considered the house of allies and open enemies. And Mars relates to a country's warriors, its style, and its approach to fighting. And if you know the reality of the US and how it has navigated international relationships, it's very shadow Gemini. It's very two-faced. Even with allies, there are always strings attached. There's always a story of friendship and support, while there's actually manipulation, control, and deceit beneath the surface. Most Americans still believe in our modern mythos that we have been a force for good in the world, especially since we started our climb towards global dominance after World War II. But if you know the real story, you know that there has been coup after coup, assassination after assassination of democratically elected leaders in other countries when colonial business interests felt threatened or wanted to expand. And there's also the internal fracture that has always been here. The fact that we were built on slavery and genocide from the very beginning, and that a ferocious white supremacist death cult has always been right beneath the surface of any respectable veneer we might use to cover it up. The Uranus in the United States chart is in the 6th house, which has a traditional association with the military. The 6th house in natal astrology is related to the workspace, the day-to-day grind, and in mundane astrology, we find troops there, the boots on the ground, rank and file, marching orders aspect of the military. We also find manufacturing in the 6th house, industrial spaces, unions, and the working class itself. And with Uranus here, the theme of technology is particularly relevant. So the term military-industrial complex comes from a speech given by President Dwight D. Eisenhower as he was leaving office in 1961. He warned about the fast-growing sector of military research and manufacturing, the rise of which he'd very much helped facilitate during his presidency, but which he was starting to recognize as an interest that could threaten democracy. The whole speech is interesting, and it's worth reading a longer quote here. This conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together. Akin to and largely responsible for the sweeping changes in our industrial military posture has been the technological revolution during recent decades. Today, the solitary inventor tinkering in his shop has been overshadowed by task forces of scientists in laboratories and testing fields. In the same fashion, the free university, historically the fountainhead of free ideas and scientific discovery, has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research. Yet, in holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific technological elite. It is the task of statesmanship to mold, to balance, and to integrate these and other forces, new and old, within the principles of our democratic system, ever aiming toward the supreme goals of our free society. So just for fun, I looked the astrology of this speech up. It's from January 17th, 1961. And you can see that the nodes are squaring the U.S. natal Uranus, and the sun is exactly conjunct to the U.S. natal Pluto, so that's interesting. And so the seeds of what we consider the modern military-industrial complex were planted at the end of World War II during this first Uranus return. The development of nuclear weapons in particular had led to the explosion of funding for and profit from military research and manufacturing. Just as there is today, there was a revolving door between the upper echelons of government and the most influential positions in the business world. And as World War II drew to a close, these individuals were well aware that they needed a new enemy and a new war to maintain the level of profit that they had started to accrue during the urgency of the World War II years. Before the Axis was even fully defeated, they were considering how to put the Soviet Union in that role of the new enemy. And after dropping the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they were immediately ready to pivot. And it's really important to understand that a lot of these elite were basically Nazis. They were capitalists who'd shared business interests with the Nazis before World War II, who tried to hide the worst atrocities of the Nazis from President Truman because they didn't want America to go to war with Germany and jeopardize those business interests. And after the war, they were responsible for Operation Paperclip, the CIA program that repatriated more than 1,600 Nazi scientists into the US, giving them new identities and high salaries to contribute their expertise to American Cold War efforts. So there's a very shadow Gemini, two-faced energy there, where in the post-war years, the public face of the government was very anti-Nazi, but in secret, on the inside, there were many powerful people who shared ideology with the Nazis and who actively supported actual Nazis to make new lives without ever being accountable. I won't go further down the rabbit hole here, but if you want a more concrete understanding of what was happening in the back rooms of power during this period, The Devil's Chessboard by David Talbot is a good place to start. Also, though, at least some version of the military-industrial complex can actually be traced back to the first Uranus return during America's Civil War. Arms production on U.S. soil increased dramatically during the Civil War, especially in the North, and one of the reasons that the Union was able to win was because their more established manufacturing base swung into high gear to produce weapons. So techniques for more efficient mass production of weapons were developed during this time, and other parts of the technology evolved quickly too, with upgrades to the accuracy of rifles and other firearms, how quickly they could be reloaded, how bad the recoil was, and other functional aspects. Since it was a breakdown of the country's unity, a split down the middle of America, both geographically and psychologically, the Gemini energy is also very relevant for that time period. As we approach our third Uranus return, the fault lines appear to be opening again, both domestically and abroad. The theme of technology is more prominent than ever, both when it comes to conventional and unconventional weaponry, and also with the information warfare I talked about in the first video of this series. AI and social media will inevitably be used to fracture narratives and control the population in more and more insidious ways. And then there's the surveillance tech, the new collaborations between the US government and tech companies like Palantir to develop nationwide databases to monitor civilian behavior and stamp out dissent. We have the tech theme of Uranus, the military theme of the sixth house, and the information theme of Gemini here. The recent appointments of 4 tech executives, 1 from Meta, 1 from Palantir, and 2 from OpenAI, to the high-ish rank of lieutenant colonel within the US Army is another perfect example of the convergence of astrological themes. So, what happens now? That's what we'll explore next time in the third and final part of this series. I already mentioned some of what I'll cover, but it's going to get even weirder than plain old techno-fascism. We have to talk about UAPs and NHI, advanced tech like anti-gravity devices, psionics, and free energy, and the Nazi-rooted esotericism that in its modern form I like to call ayahuasca fascism. And we have to take a cold, hard look at effective accelerationism, the bizarre eschatology embraced by the same tech leaders I've been naming who truly want to bring on the collapse of life on Earth as soon as possible. Like I said, I don't necessarily think everything will go as they plan because life always fights back. As the Palestinians, the Sudanese, the Congolese, and others existing under the brutal heel of empire today are showing us, and as oppressed peoples throughout history have always shown us, they will never succeed in stamping out the life force no matter how hard they try. But they will try, and we should be clear-eyed. We should metabolize as much of the darkness as we can in advance if we want to be ready. If you watched to the end of this video, you're a rock star. Thank you for being here and for being on the wavelength. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and join the new channel membership if you want to participate in my first members-only live stream this month, where you can bring your personal questions or your questions for the collective, and I'll pull cards to get us some insight from the spirit guides. And come to the summit in August. I'll be presenting on the US Pluto return, which couldn't be more relevant to the collapse of social and political norms happening in America today. There are also 19 other astrologers presenting on all kinds of different subjects, not all political. And there are 3 live roundtables, including one that I'll be attending on America's natal astrology. And registration for the Revolution Rising Summit is free. So if you want to take a big leap in your astrological education, definitely check it out. I've also got a masterclass coming up on July 26th called The Rise of Big Tech, Uranus Transits and the Digital Age. This is an analysis that starts with the Uranus-Neptune conjunction in the early 90s and looks at how it unfolded into the tech behemoths trampling through the world today. The internet can seem like something that just kind of happened to us, and it can be hard to get a grip on all of the ways that it's influenced our world. But astrology gives us a bird's eye view on history that is really supportive for putting everything in context. I think this particular history of the internet and the World Wide Web is crucial for grasping what is coming in next with Uranus and Gemini. And then again, head over to Horoscopes by Hummingbird for rising sign horoscopes. The ones for Uranus and Gemini are up now, and I'll have another set for the Mercury retrograde in Leo coming later this month. Links for everything are in the description box. Thank you again for watching, and I'm grateful to be in it together with you. Until next time.